Hi everyone, thanks for coming tonight. We have two presentations. One is by me about OpenBalena, which is an open source tool for IoT, Internet of Things, fleet management. And after that, Ian will touch on his experiences with OpenWRT on his router and the slow journey that he has with getting things running on the router that he has. Right. Is a very short outline here. As a preliminary or this precursor to the actual talk, I have to say it was actually supposed to be a lot more substantial, this talk. However, I encountered some problems over the weekend that I couldn't resolve, and not even today. So it will be, unfortunately, a little bit less than I wanted to show, but it's still going to be why you wanted to use OpenBalena, what it is, how you would use it, and did it work? And well, you already know the answer to that, sort of. The reason for using OpenBalena is I'm currently involved in a project where we actually will be deploying lots and lots of IoT devices. And at the moment, we do have a custom sort of like cobbled together solution for dealing with that, but it's very manual and time consuming for rolling out basically new devices. And the idea is that we can use some of these IoT fleet management frameworks. AWS, for instance, has one. Never really looked into it, what's involved with that one. But one of the former colleagues in that project that I'm currently working on mentioned Balena OS, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll just have a look at that. And not too long ago, I also noticed that they not only have their paid for service, but they also have an open source version out there. So I thought, oh, cool, I'll give that a go. So why would you really use it? Yeah, well, it's basically making it easier to deploy things, automating updates, whether that's your host system or if you're using Docker and these things, you would want to actually push out things quicker, or if there's a new version of your application out, so push it out on all the devices rather than, oh, I have to trundle around the country, connect to those, upload a new file, and then trundle around again to the next one or whatnot. That would be way too slow and too expensive doing it. So despite us having remote access, you still want to have something that's less manual and more automated. Once again, speed up the provisioning. So our problem is, oh, typo, great. Provisioning, sort of like rolling out new devices, is quite manual at the moment. With one device, it's extremely tedious. Can't even clone SD cards for that one. That's each time a manual process setting one up, so we're not happy about that. Remote access is something that we do have, not perfect, but it works fine, and that would be good to have as well. And the point is, especially if you're trying to, if you have a small team and limited funds, then you actually want to focus on the actual software service that you're developing rather than trying to sort out sort of like the whole fleet management side of things. And taking all that into account, if you can deploy things quick, update things really quick, and also provision things quick, means you're basically faster to market. Especially in the fast-paced IoT market, this is actually very, very crucial. All right, so OpenBalena, as I mentioned earlier, came across that they actually have an open source version available. It's only a command line interface compared to their paid for service, which is, I think, what was it? I think $109 per month. That you pay for that, and I think it was, let's have a look. So that is for one user, and you can maintain about 20 different or 20 devices. That's it, and then you can add additional operators, which are another $29. Developers another $49, or an admin, which are $49, and so on. And of course, support is not great. And then if you want to have more, a production one, then you can have up to 100 devices, and it costs you $1,439. And that's not New Zealand dollars, that's US dollars, of course. So having a very small budget, the open source version, of course, and self-hosted open source version is, of course, very appealing. And interestingly enough, it's also a GPL license, what they are basically providing, so that companies like Amazon can't grab it and then build their own frameworks on top of that, and it was never to be seen again. So that was quite interesting to see. So yeah. How does OpenBalena then work? Well, it mostly relies on Docker for pushing out containers to the devices and provisioning these. It's very lightweight images that they provide compared to some other images that I've seen for the various devices. It's their own Balena OS, which is based on Yocto Linux. So that is an initiative from the Linux Foundation to make it easy to create custom Linux operating systems. And OpenBalena or Balena OS, they support multiple devices. They have all the Raspberry Pis. They have BeagleBoard and BeagleBoard. They have various NVIDIA Jetsons there, the Nano and the Xavier and the TX2. Intel Edison and NUC, Microsoft Surface 6 and another one, and like generic ARM architecture and Intel architecture and a whole bunch of other ones that I actually am not familiar with, but apparently they are used in the IoT space as small devices. So I thought, cool, covers our bases that we're actually after, because at the moment we're looking at Raspberry Pis and Jetsons. So I thought, okay, ticks quite a few boxes. And if it's just command line based, doesn't matter. We can always build, because it's also open API, we can always build, if we really go down that track after the evaluation period, then we can always build our own custom sort of like user interface for that if we wanted to. Here's a little demonstration how it works. So on the left-hand side at the bottom, so left-hand side is the device itself. So here's a drone depicted. There's a smartphone, and I'm not quite sure why there's an envelope, but we'll just leave it at that. So at the bottom we have, since it's Linux based, a Linux kernel. It's running systemd. On top of that we have the network manager for managing Wi-Fi and Ethernet. Dropbear basically for SSH access. Awahi, I think, is for network discovery, if I remember that correctly. Modem manager, if you have, for instance, cellular modems, rather than regular sort of other modems. I mean, certain modems register themselves as Ethernet devices, others are cellular modems, so you need both modem manager and network manager if you're not running on a wide network. DNS mask is used for DNS resolution, and OpenVPN basically for remote access. And on top of that, of course, Docker, and then basically that's where your own applications can come in, and you can basically deploy as many containers as you'd like. Of course, as many as fit on the device itself. And then you can have on the local network, you can basically have your developer machine here, where you have the Balena command line interface, and then you basically have your own programming tool chain for turning things into Docker and whatnot, how you program and whatnot, and then you can basically push out things onto those devices. That's the theory. Sounds all good, because most of our things are already Dockerized, so that was ticking in another box. And did it work? Well, kind of. So there's a get started example, which I was following. Initially, I had a spare Raspberry Pi 3, Raspberry Pi 4. I thought, okay, I'll just use that one, on which I'll basically then run the OpenBalena server, and then use my old Raspberry Pi and Raspberry Pi 2 and 1, and see whether I can basically run and deploy containers on those ones. Well, turns out definitely doesn't run on ARM architecture. All kinds of crap outs that you get. That wasn't very exciting. So I thought, okay, well, maybe they don't cater for that. I mean, I have to admit there was a notion what they've tested it on, but they didn't say it's definitely not going to work on these architectures, which I would have liked to see. So I had, as an Intel-based x86-64 platform, I had an Arch Linux, my personal laptop, which I wanted to use for that. Well, after spending a few hours on that, that didn't work either. And I was a little bit annoyed. It's maybe due to some other idiocy on my part, but at the end of the day, I basically just decided to go with the tested version of Ubuntu 18.04 that they recommended that it at least works on, and then went with that. So some of the documentation is unfortunately a little bit outdated. So rather than app and apps, it's now called fleet and fleets. And the main thing, which was quite a bit of a stumbling point for me, was that they actually have subdomains, and you usually require an externally visible DNS entry, and you have the subdomains like API for the actual OpenBalena API to run a registry. That's basically where your Docker containers reside on. VPN for remote access. S3, I'm not quite sure. It's probably for supplying additional data. And tunnel is something else that I haven't actually used, at least not knowingly. So what I did in order to get things going, I used, actually it's a Raspberry Pi 4, but that's all right, that I set up. I configured bind to act as my name server, so I can have these subdomains running. And I initially had a home.lan domain, which I couldn't get to work for some reason due to their certificates that were being generated. It didn't accept having it for two domains, funnily enough. It only worked with the default one, which was openbalena.local. So in the end, I just went with openbalena.local as a domain. And for actual DNS resolution, I just added my ISP, Slingshot DNS servers as forwarders to bind. Another thing is, since it's running on my internal home network, I added to DHCP on that Raspberry Pi that it's using a static IP address, router, and DNS entry. And then on my actual router, I then also put in, please use that Raspberry Pi as a DNS server, which is a little bit roundabout way. So my router is handing out IP addresses, and then the Raspberry Pi has to be up and running before any internet then works at home at the moment. And my wife was suffering a little bit on the weekend for that because, all of a sudden our internet was going, yeah, no, that was me. I'm sorry. But at least it has been working, and I mean, the Raspberry Pi doesn't really do a lot. It's just really running bind at the moment. So that's sort of for getting around the DNS problem there. On my other laptop, I basically used VirtualBox, where I installed an Ubuntu 18.04. I used a bridged network interface, so it would get its own IP address from my router. And this now runs OpenBalena server. And I also added on etc hosts the API registry, VPN, S3, and tunnel subdomains as well. So it would just, rather than going via DNS, that it would just go locally on localhost. But the DNS names are necessary on the subnetwork for the other devices to actually find the API. So on etc host, that's really just for the OpenBalena server to find its connectors as well. Okay, so after fluffing around with all that and finding out all the little tricky bits that you need to actually configure and whatnot, so once you actually configure your OpenBalena server, you have to copy a certificate basically onto the machine where you install your Balena command line interface, which is a separate download. And then it's running Node.js as far as I know. And for that to work with this self-signed certificate, you have to have the Node extra CA certs environment variable and point it to that particular certificate. And for the CLI to know actually what domain you're actually connecting to, you have to create a .balena rc.yaml file in your home directory and insert basically the OpenBalena local domain into it. Once that's done, then you can actually log in and no longer get a problem with that it can either not find the domain or that it found a self-signed certificate in the chain and it doesn't accept that. So Node.js says, nah, I'm not doing it. So once you get around all these problems, then you at least can sort of like log in from the command line into the backend server. And that allows you basically to create your first fleet, which is a simple command line, Balena fleet create, and you give it a name. And that's that. So that's kind of like the grouping for these devices that you will then provision. So I had a spare Raspberry Pi 2. So you can basically go to their website, download one of those many base images that they provide and maintain. Download that, unzip it, and then you can use the Balena command line interface again. It's basically just Balena OS configure, then the image name, and then -- fleet with the name of the fleet that you just created prior. And that changes a few parameters. So it basically mounts the file system and does some changes in files, expands basically some variables. Once that's done, you can then copy that image onto an SD card using DD. And since we do have, unfortunately, custom DNS servers, that's something that I had to figure out also for quite a while, how that will work. You have to change a configuration file before you boot it up. And you basically have to pop in the SD card again, open a particular partition, that's the Resin boot, so Resin OS, it's their name for their Balena OS or Yocto based Linux system. Open on that boot partition the config.json file and insert an entry sort of like for DNS servers. That's my local one, the Raspberry Pi 4 that I'm running here, and 8888, the Google one, just as a fallback. But before you question whether that actually works or not, yes, it does. So it actually does name resolution, so it's working fine. And having Google in there doesn't matter. Right. Once that's done, and you've ejected your SD card, you pop it in your device, you boot the device, and in theory, according to the documentation, within 2 minutes, it should register and show up when you're actually querying all the devices for this particular fleet. But it doesn't. And that's basically where I spent the last 2 days with, and I couldn't get that to work. Tried all kinds of things. Well, other people tried and didn't really apply to me. So one thing that I found just before lunch today was when I was looking through through the systemd journal, I saw that TLS SSL was crapping out with certificate not yet valid. And I thought, what are you talking about? I created the server certificate yesterday, and then I was looking, oh, it's running on UTC time, the device. So it's 13 hours behind New Zealand time. So is that maybe a reason? And then after lunch, I thought, no, actually it's not the problem because it still has a timestamp in there. It's not just going by date, which is a day behind. But I figured out, looking further through the journal, that the Raspberry Pi, since it has no hardware clock, starting up September 20th, but I'm not quite sure whether it was September 20th, 2021 or even earlier than that. I guess that's whenever the image was generated, and I haven't found a way for changing it. So it starts up till it actually hits the NTP systemd job and updates it. However, the API connection happens before then and says, whoop, that's not valid, I'm rejecting that. So I'm unfortunately a few seconds too late or too early for doing the connection, and then it basically registers on the first time the device, and that doesn't seem to happen, unfortunately. Some things do work. So if I'm checking basically for the device using the Balena command line interface, a scan there does find the device. It outputs the ID for it, and I can basically then use the Balena CLI also to SSH into the device and look around. So I tried then also whether I could rejoin that device, basically saying, oh, join basically another fleet, and then that is supposedly works properly and succeeds, but the device still doesn't show up, and rebooting it doesn't change anything either. And then having sort of like, rather than having a power off, power on reboot, it also keeps the hardware time this time around, and it doesn't have a problem. However, I need the first boot up to register. So, well, since I have a NVIDIA Jetson here as well as a development thing, I thought, okay, how about I'll just provision that one and see whether I can do something with that at least. I mean, I chose the Raspberry Pi because it was actually, I thought, the simpler solution is less involved, because I had trouble with the NVIDIA Jetsons in the past with being a bit fiddly. Anyway, same process. You download an image, unzip it, and then provision it, and outputs unsupported file system. I thought, oh, great. So I'm using basically all the latest things that they've provided, latest image, latest software, and it comes up with it. So I honestly have no idea what's the problem with it. So, yeah, that's where that is at. So as my next steps, so I'm still going to show some things. I'm going to share my screen shortly rather than a presentation, so you can actually see that there's actually things happening. So I can still try out a few things, and I was thinking of actually paying for a DNS name, so we can have a proper subdomains in there. Just use a free cloud instance for the server to run on there. And if that still doesn't work, I still have the option of just paying for 1 month basically of their service, so I can actually try out things and then see whether at least their paid for service actually works, and then see whether that would be an option for the interim till we've figured out how the open source version works, and then just cancel that and just pull out devices out of their commercial service and then just maintain them ourselves from then on. But that's future work. Cool. All right. In that case, I'll be starting sharing the screen. But actually, okay, just share that one. Let's just do that. All right. All right. Radio. So things are happening here. So I hope everyone can see my screen. So
I'm just waiting. I'm getting 3 dots, like a
all right.
white thing at the moment. Yeah.
I can see your screen.
Still,
Okay.
I don't know whether it's just my link's slow or something. It's not updated. Has anyone else got Peter's screen?
Yeah, it took a long time for me, but it's here now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, oh well. I guess it'll come. Perhaps, if I hit refresh, will that
I'm not sure whether that works.
That might.
Yeah, it's worth a try, but you have to come back in again, so to speak. There's a couple of the questions to be re-asked and re-answered.
Yeah. Okay, well, perhaps I'll do that and just see what happens. Okay, so I'm disappearing.
Yep. All right, I'll just wait a little bit then for Ian to reappear.
Yeah, as soon as I came back in, the updated Peter screen's there.
Okay, cool. All right.
I'll turn my mic off and leave it.
Yep. Okay, okay. So, okay. So I have on my path. I'm just. Oops. Oh my god. Clear. Oh dear. Haven't used that in years. All right, so I have the command line interface, which is Balena. So you can do all kinds of things. It has quite a few commands. So go to the top. Those primary commands like logging in, pushing out, images, logs, dealing with fleets, devices, deploying things, leaving, scanning and whatnot. And there's also all kinds of other things like where you can actually do things about configurations, do other things with devices like restarting, updating the host system and things like that. Do stuff around the operating system. So for instance, for provisioning is happening there. You can tag things and all kinds of stuff. So for the time being, I'll just gonna use it for logging in because it has a certain period that I can log in. So I'm just going to use credentials here. Oh, so I've logged in successfully. So that was basically when you're creating your server, you supply the first admin. And if I'm looking for devices, then it should in theory list my Raspberry Pi 2, but it doesn't, fortunately. So if I sort of like do a scan for devices, which I unfortunately have to use as root, then it's basically scanning for local devices on the local network, and it does find one, and that is exactly my Raspberry Pi 2. So architecture ARMv7, and it tells you what Balena OS version it's running, what kernel it's running, and whatnot, and also what Docker version. So I can then use the Balena command line interface. Oop, no, not that one. That was in the wrong. That one, where I can then just log into that device and oops, and I'm here. And you can see what's actually there. So if I go in my mount boot partition, you can see there's my config JSON. So the usual command line, you can actually have a look at that one for the Raspberry Pi. You can see C group memory. And I can also see this there. And also look at the config JSON file. So there's a lot in there. I'll just make that a bit easier to read. So up here it basically has my API OpenBalena local, the endpoint has an API key in here and whatnot. Here's the root certificate that it actually uses for connecting. It's a Raspberry Pi device type. It has my DNS servers in here, so that's all good. And one thing that I was trying earlier today is also whether I can, rather than using US NTP servers, whether the New Zealand one would be a bit quicker, so I could maybe avoid a race condition between accessing the API and updating the hardware time on my Raspberry Pi, but unfortunately that didn't work either, so that's the way it is. UUID, it's basically the ID of the device. And yeah, so that's that in terms of that. Unfortunately, not much else that I can do with it because I can't really push anything out. I just had something in my mind that I could show. Oh yeah, so if I do a NS lookup of micro-ACNZ, you can see that it uses DNS mask, which runs on 127.0.0.2, and yeah. So if we're looking at that, so it doesn't actually have that as a server in here. But if we do a resolution of OpenBalena.local, then we actually see that this is actually the IP address of my virtual box instance. There we go. 2.60. As you can see, that's properly being resolved, so that's all good. So from that point of view, I know at least that my name resolution works. So it unfortunately has other problems than, look at journal control. There isn't much anymore happening. So if I look at API ones, it does initially has a error trying to connect with the name resolution. However, that gets resolved later on once everything else comes online. Yeah, so I have basically here, it binds to that version and whatnot of the API. So in theory, if I list my devices, yes, no. Let's export that again. It still doesn't list it, so despite it actually in theory connecting to the API, and I mean, so on that console there's a whole lot of stuff going on. So I can look at API keys. So if I go back on my machine here, around boot, if I output my configuration JSON file again, oops, and where's my API key? That's my API key. So I can see that there's authentication happening, but I'm still not sure why it's not really working properly. So yeah, still some stuff to sort out, but I guess we'll leave it at that, and I'll stop sharing my screen. All right, does anyone have any questions? Apart from being disappointed that they couldn't see how you can really deploy things and whatnot, so I have no idea. I'm probably mostly disappointed about that as well after wasting so much time on that. So feel free to go turn your mics on. No questions?
None from me.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Alistair, by the way. Your first time tonight?
Yeah, I normally go to the NZ open source software one, but
Oh, right, okay.
probably should have joined this one occasionally.
That's all right. We keep recording them, so at one stage I'm also going to upload them on YouTube, so if you should feel bored, then you can start watching them there. And feel free also to join our WLAG mailing list if you want to, because I post those meetings in there as well. Yes, we do have a mailing list.
That's one of the issues, isn't it? That our organisations are geographically labelled, if not. As soon as you go virtual, there's no geography to worry about.
Yeah, even with the mailing lists, we have people from all over the show, expats and whatnot. So,
Alistair and I were talking on the Rocket Chat at NZ. So glad you're able to come, Alistair.
It's been interesting so far. I had a look at Balena quite a while back, and I only wanted to set it up for my Raspberry Pi to run some Docker images. That's interesting to see somebody taking it a little bit further than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just otherwise very tedious if you have to maintain sort of. I mean, my background is machine learning, so I do a lot with deep learning nowadays. So everything has to be Dockerized because it's just too painful with all the dependencies and whatnot. So from that point of view, everything is mostly already there for Docker, but having something that takes the pain out, sort of like deploying and managing these devices, that's sort of like really the missing key, the missing piece of the puzzle that we want for our project. So that's why I was actually hoping that it would actually live up to what it's promising. And I was just hitting so many snags. It was just not much fun. But yeah. Have you used anything else like AWS? There was a green something.
I've used a lot of things for deployments because I've got technically not really anymore so much, but I'm supposed to be managing about 10 servers. But yeah, like I've been looking at like infrastructure as code and running it all on AWS and stuff like that, so we don't have to run hardware. But yeah, most of the time it's just a couple of Docker composers and literally just an install script that installs Docker and the necessary stuff and then runs the composers.
Yeah. I mean, I found that running stuff in the cloud, if you need GPUs, they charge you an arm and a leg. That's not feasible. So your own hardware is still cheaper.
Yeah, I can totally get that. Like we will eventually get to that because actually the company I work for, we do arts and videos and basically games. So we will eventually get to that point where we need to start rendering lots of stuff. And yeah, I think at that point we've got enough video cards in house that I'll probably just have a background script that runs through and does all that.
Yes, exactly. So yeah,
50 machines that just sit there overnight doing nothing. It'd be great to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Right. Yes. Right, I'll see whether I can upload Ian's presentation now. No, still too large, despite removing mine. Okay. Anyway, in that case, I'll make Ian. So I posted in the chat, by the way, our WLAG mailing list.
Yeah, which is subscribed to.
And I'll make Ian a presenter.
The little presenter screen hasn't come up yet, Peter. You've made me the presenter?
No.
Oh. Yeah, okay, now I've got it.
I think it was delayed with changing its menu. I must have clicked on something else. I think unmute you. Oh.
I should be able to share my screen. Let me just
Give it a go.
OpenWRT presentation PDF. Yeah. Okay. You got an OpenWRT?
I do. I see something. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
How about everyone else?
You should see my first slide, folks.
Good, yeah.
All good? Well, I will go on then to the second slide. Anyway, this is OpenWRT Revisited by me. I believe, if you haven't heard of it, it claims anyway that the OpenWRT project is a Linux operating system targeting embedded devices, and in particular, like wireless modems and routers and things like that. Instead of trying to create a single static firmware, OpenWRT provides a fully writable file system with package management. And the other claim is this frees you from the application selection and configuration provided by the vendor and allows you to customize the device through the use of packages to suit any application. And for developers, OpenWRT is the OpenWRT, I keep saying right, is the framework to build an application without having to build a complete firmware around it. For users, this means the ability to customize, full customization, to use the device in ways never envisaged. So that's the marketing spiel of it. And if we go back 3 years, then I did a presentation in WLAG, was my first attempt at playing with OpenWRT. And I did my presentation material, I actually realized just last week that I hadn't posted it. So there's, I've now posted it in our WLAG meetings repository, and there's 3 slides shows there. And I believe I only showed 2 of them, and but if all 3 have 140 slides in them, so that might have been why. It might have been all a bit much to watch in one night. So if you want to peruse how I got on 3 years ago, then there's 3 presentations there in that repository. When I did it back in 2019, I was using OpenWRT version 18. The kernel, the Linux kernel, was 4.9. BusyBox is 1.28, and I had to go at loading Python as a extra options, and it was at 3.6 at the time. And if we go to what's happening now, which is this slide, and having another shot at this, I took the latest, which was released, 21.02 of OpenWRT was released in October 2021, and it's got the 5.4 kernel. BusyBox is now up to 1.33, and Python is at 1.9. Okay, so when I stumbled around with it, I should describe it, I think, appropriately in 3 years ago, I sort of found a lot of things seemed quite unstable to me. Admittedly, I was pretty unstable as well. But now, moving to the this latest version, I seem to have made more progress than I did before. This is the modem that I played around with 3 years ago. It's an old Vodafone modem. It's a Huawei HD556A, and this is revision C. And I before I had version 18 of OpenWRT, and what I did was upgraded it to the latest one, 21. If we pull open the modem, this is just a bit of a look at the hardware inside. You've got the main CPU here. There's I'm not using this at all, but there's voice for if you were using the telephone sockets and things. There's 4 LAN ports along the bottom there, the yellow ones. There's the Ethernet switch is a Broadcom 5325 switch. It seems pretty common in a lot of these modems, and but bear in mind it's only 10/100 megabits per second. So if you're hunting around trying to find a modem to play around with, you might want to go for something newer. It doesn't use this chip, but uses a chip that supports up to 1,000 megabits per second. And this particular one has a Ralink Wi-Fi chip on it. There's 5 little holes there. You can have a TTL console serial port if you are wired into those and had got +5 ground and TX and RX. I don't know what the 5th one is. And I can feed that to a serial port on a laptop. But you don't really need that because you can SSH into the modem. Okay, the next slide. Okay, this is a bit of a look at internally what happens inside it. You've got the Wi-Fi coming into the CPU, coming out of the CPU, some USB ports. There's also those an Ethernet port switch, and that actually should have 4 lines there of 10/100 Ethernet. And one of the objectives that I wanted to do was have one of these ports as a WAN port, and the other 3 is local Ethernet. And the modem that I'm using here was had an ADSL input, expected that, not a WAN port, an RJ11 phone line socket. But so what we're trying to do is have a WAN port come into the Ethernet switch and have 3 local Ethernet LANs, and have a Wi-Fi, and maybe even get the USB to work. And this stuff over here with the RJ11s, I'm not worried about analog telephones, lines and things. The setup that I initially had was, or what you're kind of seeing now is, here's my slideshow on my PC, and it's coming into a switch and then going to my ISP provided wireless router, and off from there it goes to my internet service provider. And so this internet service provider, he might send me a DHP served IP address whenever I power on my wireless router. So some IP address that's been assigned to New Zealand will be allocated, I'll be given, I guess. And then the ports out here, this router happens to be managed at 192.168.1.254. So if I go into that port, I can manage this router. And then at DHCP serves, I think it must start at 65 and go upwards from there. So my PC has picked up an IP address, let's say, of 192.168.1.65. I'll just see for real what it is. Hang on, I'll just have a quick look. connection information. I'm 68. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's how you kind of, the configuration is. The switch box doesn't really need to be there. I could just wire that straight into a LAN port on the back of the wireless router, or in fact I could use the Wi-Fi on my laptop to get to the wireless router. But anyway, let's take a look at what I've done. By having the switch box here, this is my Wrt router, which I've loaded OpenWRT into, and it has expects management to be done at 192.168.1.1. So that way I can, on my PC, I can SSH from the console, into this router. Once I've SSH'd into the router, if I've set up the WAN port, I've got 3 LAN ports, but the fourth LAN, I can make a WAN port, and that will go into my ISP provided router, and then I get out onto the internet. So once I get into there, I can actually do a ping 8.8.8.8, and I'm pinging it. I'm getting it back from the service provider via this path here. And so one of the first things I wanted to do was, when I power this on, there's a way of holding on the reset button for 10 seconds or 12 seconds or something, and then it will bring up a menu to say, do you want to download a file system? So I had the OpenWRT as a Linux squashed file system sitting on my laptop, so that got downloaded for a start. Once I put that in, I was able to connect. I'll show you later on that I can SSH into it. And the OpenWRT has a web-based server in it called Lucy, L-U-C-I. I think the L-U is Lua language it was written in. And I don't know whether it's a command interface or console interface. I'm not sure what the CI is supposed to stand for. So that's the configuration I've got at the moment. So I'll show you using the SSH and using Lucy later on. Anyway, and I can also carry on with my slideshow, which I'll do. What was this all about? See this? Okay. Okay. I'm not going to really cover here about doing the installation and things like that. If you go back to those slides I did 3 years ago, you'll find how to verifying if your modem is supported by WRT, downloading the squash file system to your PC, powering on the modem so it goes into software update mode, booting WRT, SSHing into the PC, which you'll see that later, and using the web-based browser. So a lot of that I covered 3 years ago, and it hasn't changed. Right? For OpenWRT management, completely managed using SSH and the terminal, the terminal window in your PC. You can also do SCP to transfer files from the PC to either way, to the modem or to the PC. And the Lucy web user interface makes many administration tasks easier, so it claims anyway. And as I mentioned before, a TTL console port may be connected up to the motherboard. Nowadays, OpenWRT full releases ship with the Lucy Web user interface installed. I think some releases which are made for modems with only a small amount of memory don't have the Lucy Web user interface. So there's 2 ways of getting into the system. Here's on a console window, me SSHing into 192.168.1.1 and putting in the password, and then I'm taken into the root accounts prompt, and here I've shown the date, and it's showing me UTC date and time. The other way in is to have a browser and put in 192.168.1.1, and it takes you to this browser window. Okay. I'm not looking at, Angus. I'll just have a quick look at the comments. Okay. Lua configuration. It's Lua configuration. Thank you, Angus. Lucy is Lua configuration interface, right? Okay, if you log in and do 2 tabs, then it will display all the the ash commands that you have at the prompt. And if you look through, a lot of them are pretty familiar: cat, cd, change owner, and sort of things. DD, I tried that out, that works all right. DF, D-message is there. What else we got? The date, yeah. Anyway, one of the IW is, I think that set up the wireless interface. Lua is actually installed there. And from M onwards, what have we got here? Mount, password. You're forced to, when it first installs, it doesn't have a password, you're forced to change the password. The OPKG is the OpenWRT package manager, and that's what you use for loading or doing updates to packages and installing new packages, which we'll see later on. What else? We've got SSH, which is what I'm using, or will be. SWconfig is switch config, which is used to automatically or get information about the switch within the modem, the backplane, how it's configured, or to configure it. UCI, that works, whatever it is. VI is the exciting editor that is provided, which goes back a year or two. And okay, well, we can try any of those commands later on if you would like me to. Preferably not the rm-r. Okay, if we log in and go to etc config, these are the main text files that are used to configure the system. And we're particularly interested in the network and the wireless and maybe DHCP settings. And by default, when I first booted it up, this is the network file. And I don't really understand how this works, but I think it was just, all it was doing was, I've got these 4 LAN ports, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and this 5T is the connection to the CPU, is how I've read it or understood it. And so this was, I think by default, all I'm able to do is just connect from one device to another, or when I'm in the original configuration. And then I found, I found on the network, internet somewhere, setting it up so that what I wanted to do was have LAN ports 0, 1, and 2 to be a local LAN, and then I wanted the port 3 to be the my WAN. So the convention seems to be, this is VLAN 1 and VLAN 2, and then over here we've got these switches. This is the switch for VLAN 1, and my configuration of the WAN interface, it doesn't say VLAN 2, where does it say that? Anyway, I need to spend more time reading to actually understand how all these configurations, how it all works. When I put this configuration in, and then I actually go and it worked. It seems to work. I reboot and it takes this configuration. It's fine. When I then use the Lucy and use the web-based interface, and I want to look at the network configuration, it gives me a message like this, which says the existing network configuration needs to be changed for Lucy to function properly. Upon pressing continue, Bridges configuration will be updated and the network will be restarted to apply the updated configuration. So I clicked on that, and I think it added this piece at the very bottom, config device. But again, I still really don't know. I don't fully understand this. But anyway, it got rid of the error message, and it still works. So you've got to be lucky. Now, here's looking before I got that information from SSHing into the box. On Lucy now, when I connect on interfaces, before that was when I was getting this error message, but now it shows the LAN and I don't know what else I can say about it, but it shows the LAN, and even though this WAN is in red, it doesn't mean that it's faulty. It's just another color, I think. So using Lucy shows me some more data. Also using Lucy, I can look at the switch configuration, and I get this error message here, but looking at it, Googling OpenWRT, what it might be, it sort of said it was a known bug and that they hope would go away, or they'd fix it or something. So maybe a future release will clear that problem up. If we look down here at the port status, I'm running this with just one cable plugged into port 1, LAN port 1, and so ports 1, 2, and 3 are my local LAN, and so they're on this virtual LAN ID 1. And if I look at VLAN ID 2, then port 4 is plugged into that, and there's a port 5 which my hardware doesn't actually have the port 5 from what I work, and then there's also this CPU Ether 0, which I don't know. I guess exactly what that means. I guess the Wi-Fi would have to come through the CPU, I guess, to get into the WAN. So maybe that's how Wi-Fi puts its head in the door. You can also set up the Wi-Fi configuration. This was the default config when I after I'd loaded the original OpenWRT package. So it just calls itself OpenWRT and has no encryption. So I sort of modified that slightly. So just looking at it, this is the Lucy equivalent of looking, I guess, at that information. Okay. And I sort of tried to draw a diagram. I'm not really sure how this network works. I mean, the original network, I guess, was four Ethernet, and you could the switch allowed data traffic to go between each port, and I guess this 5T or whatever went up to the CPU. But that, if you can make out, if the font's not too small, then down the left-hand side was the configuration that it defaulted, the original configuration. And then this was after I got the WAN working, and so I've got two virtual switch LANs, I suppose they're called. But whether this bridge links the two somehow through the CPU, I don't quite understand all that. Anyway, moving on. We move on to package management. which is at the command line, it's OPKG, and this is one of the things is there's no help, so you can't go OPKG -H. In fact, what I've cut out of here is a couple of lines of error lines saying, what did you mean? Because I should have some other words here. But anyway, we've got standard sort of things you'd find for package management: update, upgrade, install, configure, remove, that sort of thing, and information, which we'll have a look at this later on. We can list all available packages, or list the installed ones, list the ones that the upgrades exist for, that sort of thing. Okay, when I do OPKG update, it takes maybe a minute, and it downloads all the package information, the latest package information. And then I can go, this was after I did the installation, the original installation using the October binary file, October last year. Then when I went list upgradable, it gave me 21 packages, I think there is, or 23, I can't remember, that for which there were updates available. So I applied them. You have to apply them one at a time. You can't put a wildcard, so it's a bit slow. There is people out there have come up with some fancy command that uses list upgrade, and it's a little loop that runs. It seems to work. If I go over to Lucy with the web command line interface, then as you can see, there's a total of 9,322 packages. So there's it's got quite an extensive library out there. And at this point, I'm 93%. I think this was before I had done the 23 upgrades, which dropped it. I think the next slide might show. Yeah, there's 21, here were the 21 updates. So I could also do them not only from the command line, but I can do them from Lucy web interface. After doing the upgrades, it's dropped down to 71%, and there's no more upgrades to be done. That was a couple of nights ago, last week sometime. I noticed tonight that there's 2 more upgrades have been released that could be applied. I then started playing around with installing Python as a package, and if you go out there, there's actually 650 using a filter up the top there with the word Python, and there's 650 packages. And if you put in like Python 3, it's got a size of 1.1 KB, but I think it's just a script, and it actually picks a whole lot of other ones to install. And in fact, I ran out of available space and had to Control-C that one to stop before I completely lost all my memory. Anyway, in the end, I went back and deleted a whole lot, and just ended up with 4 Python packages installed. And when I run Python, it's at 3.9. Mind you, I'm down to about, 5% free space. Yeah, I think I am. I can't remember. All right, so that's kind of my presentation, and now I'll shared, and I'll start sharing my my console. Okay. Right, so I'm not going to SSH. After you SSH, you come into the root account, and if we go ping 8.8.8.8, we'll go back out of the modem on the WAN port and get through to my other modem and off to the ISP, and we can get a ping back so we know we're on the internet. And one of the things, well, okay, what else can we look at here? LS, perhaps what we're going to do next. If I go tab, who's tab? Okay, this is where it shows all the commands available, and since I've added some more, we've now got the Python ones in there that weren't in my slideshow because that was earlier on. Some of the a lot of these commands are actually done because we've got BusyBox. BusyBox, is my understanding, is it takes common commands like cd and change directory and these ones, and it puts them all into one file, as opposed to, I guess, on a full Linux, these are, each one of those is a separate binary file that you execute. In doing so, they've taken away some of the, they've had to trim it down and remove some of the switches. If I go ls, I'll just go up a level. Okay, and ls -l, that works. But there's probably other aspects of ls that don't happen. And if I go ls -h, there is no -h. So, although I think it does. So the help isn't quite so consistent as with other. It's with a full Unix, yeah, not using BusyBox. One of the things you might be able to help me with is if I up arrow, I've got a history there, and if I type history, it displays it. But let's say I want to run number 27, and I go splat 27, which is what I normally do on my Linux. It doesn't support that. So I think the exclamation mark can't be the delimiter. Maybe I just, yeah. I don't know what I need to do to maybe hash 27. No, that wouldn't work. Anyway, that's
history 27.
Oh, history 27. Is that type the whole word?
No, sorry.
Anyway, yeah, I just tried Googling that earlier on tonight, and I couldn't see anyone else complaining about it. So, yeah. But anyway, it must be there somewhere. I don't think everyone's happy with that. Okay, what else have we got? We got the date is UTC. We can look at, oops, free shows us still got quite a bit of memory available. It has D message. It shoots through a lot, but I'll go right back to the beginning of it. You can see Linux version 5.4. CPU is 300 megahertz, 64 megabytes of RAM on this my little modem. Right. And here's my Ethernet being loaded, things like that. Right. What else was I thinking of doing? Oh, well, so let's go into cd/etc. ls. Yeah, there's one main thing. Well, one other thing is board.json is a file that's been created by the auto configurer. I guess we can just have a look at that. And then, but the main config there's a directory config, and that seems to contain most of the main configuration of the whole system. And we've also got FS tab, which I had to play with because I'm trying to get a USB stick to work as for storage. So I played around in there. But I'll just cat this board.json. And okay, so it's got the model of the modem I'm using, the LAN sort of summary. It's got a USB port, and then the switch is it's got 0, 1, 2, and 3, and it says they're all on the LAN. 5 is Ether 0. This might have been the original configuration that was done when it first booted after being installed, because it's got all those ports connected to LAN. My WAN is not showing up there. If I go into, where was I going to go next? One of the things I added here, there should be a file that says bin. This cal data hg556.bin. If I go, is it my main devices that OpenWRT is on is MTD devices. Okay, and one of the recommendations was that apparently MTD4 contains the calibration data for the Wi-Fi, and it's meant to be unique for each modem. So it recommends you take an image of MTD4. So I use DD to make that image. That's I don't know whether it applies to other modem, or this is just unique to this particular Huawei model. Okay, so let's just look in at config. And we've got FS tab configuration file is here. The network file, and these are two with me playing around and doing backups, so the original and then the WAN, and then I updated the WAN, and the wireless. So if we, plus DHCP. So maybe if we just if I go cat. Okay, that's that. This should be the same as what you saw in the slideshow. This is where I've got 3 ports as my local LAN and 1 port as my WAN. Okay, we'll put in the wireless. Looks like this. So I've added an SSID of Wi-Fi and changed the encryption and the password. The aim of this modem is that I can take it along to our regular meetings at the Waikato Uni, and if we plug into the WAN, then on this port here, port 3, then hopefully we've got a Wi-Fi for everyone in the class, and we've also got 3 ports for the presenter, 3 LAN ports for the presenter. But we need to wait for COVID before we can get back in the classroom, or COVID to disappear. What else? We can just look at the cat DHCP. yeah, I don't know whether you can read that, but the DHCP, I was kind of expecting that to sort of say, oh, we start at, see, options start 100, option limit 150. I don't know whether that means it'd start at 198.168.1.100 and go up to .250. Perhaps that's what it means. But it's not normally, well, it's not how I would have done it. But we'll later see on Lucy's Lucy web interface that the DHCP is not quite, you know, the original, what the original was with when we had the Vodafone software it was running, or Vodafone's Linux. What else did I do? I've just got a list here. We've looked at those. I think we can go IW info. Yeah, we can. IW is, well, info tells us a bit about the Wi-Fi. I've checked that I can connect into the Wi-Fi port, okay, and again, I've only got the old 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi on this modem. So probably if you were looking around, as well as getting faster LAN ports, you'd want to get the 5 gigahertz and 2.4 for your Wi-Fi. I'll just copy a command here. The switch config is another utility, and the command device ether0 show, and we can see that I'm plugged into port 0. Port 1, 2 are not being used. Port 3 is my uplink to my link up to my other modem, which is my WAN port. Shows a port 4 and a port 5. Port 5, I guess, is a connection to the CPU. And it shows my VLANs being on port 0, 1, and 2, and this 5T, whatever that is, my CPU, and my WAN port. I'll just try a couple more. There's another command from that. This is switch 0. Oh, maybe not that one. I also found there's a real fancy command here, which seems to work, but I don't know what it proves. The number of virtual LANs maximum that I can have is 16, apparently. So I've got 2. I could do more, I guess. Okay, just to get into take a look at OPackage. It's got, see, I'm coming back to the top. You see up here, it must have one subcommand argument. So it actually sort of doesn't have a help, but it has an error message and then proceeds to provide the help. So we've got update, upgrade, install, configure, and we've got some listings. So we'll try a few of those. To speed things up, I've already done an update. So this will, we don't have to wait the minute for it to do an update. So if I list the installed, I don't know how many there are here, but these are all the options that have been installed, or all the packages that have been installed. Okay, and it includes the ones that I added, the 3 Python ones there. Okay, and if I I can list the upgradable ones. It should be quick. Having a bit of a think about that one. Okay, so there's two modules I've got installed there that in the last few days a new release. I've got new releases have come out. So I guess it means that it's actively being looked at. So I think that's probably it for the package manager. I'll just type, if anyone wants me to type a command, so that, whoops, ls. Oh, I did that. I'll try this. I think if we go cat fs tab, you can see down here I've been playing around trying to mount a USB stick, and that's the UUID of the USB stick. But in the command before the show device, I've got SDA. I don't know why I don't have an SDA1, but I've actually got a couple of files on there, but for some reason I can't seem to get them displayed. If I go ls USB, see, I have this USB disk 2.0. And that's its UUID, but I'm not. And I think I put in, if I look at ls/mnt, yeah, it's got something there, but nothing. So that's a work in progress. Previously, I haven't used the block command, but I installed that. It gives me a bit more information about the USB. That's its label, so it's picking the label up off the USB stick. And I've formatted it as ext4, but not quite sure. And I played around with the FS tab for it, I think, yeah. So I guess, well, some modems that I've worked with, they actually suggest the idea that if you've got them in an office, then you could have a shared storage for all users in the office that are on that LAN or whatever to be able to share the storage. But I haven't ever got that to work, and I don't know whether I could get it to work with this or not. But that's all something I'm playing around with. Has anyone? No one's made any. Oh, Peter's made a little comment. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing, I'll just undo this, and then the last thing I'll do is do a use my browser and use Lucy. So now I want to which is just trying to find open. Okay, that's okay. You should now sort of see a login screen, I hope. Is that? And if I just log in, is that? Yeah, hopefully that looks all right. So there's four main menu items. So status, we've got an overview of the system. That's probably a bit, I'll just try bringing it in. Control Shift plus. Okay, that might be a bit more readable. So general information about the modem, and here's memory available, used, buffered, cached, and the network information and the Wi-Fi information. Okay. Firewall routes. System log will display, pretty sure it's dmessage, but with time stamping in front of it. Whereas kernel log using the different clock, time, whatever. Real-time graphs. We'd have to sit here and wait for a little while, but they slowly come in over here. You've got load, traffic, there's nothing. The colour is under the word inbound is the purple, and outbound is the green. I don't know what the colour in between is though. Okay, we could look at ether. It's no different. Okay, I don't know what channel analysis is. Might have to sit here for a while to wait for that one. So, here we go. This is in my neighbourhood, all the Wi-Fi's around and how much conflict I've got. I think I'm on channel 11 somewhere, so I'm up here. Yeah. Colours are not the best for that. Okay. So we'll go to the system, and this should allow information on configuring the system, the time, the host name. Okay. Language, administration. All you can do is change the password. SSH keys. Okay, we'll go to software. This is basically the GUI of the OPKG package, and as you can see, I've got 8% free space for loading packages, and available packages is 9,322. I don't know, installed packages, it knows those. So I could add or remove those. And updates, these are the two updates that I found before. So yeah, you can use the GUI to look at things. If I go back to installed, and you can put in a filter like Python, and it'll just give you filter it down what you're looking through. Startup, scheduled task mount points. There's some LEDs, 4 LEDs on the front. It looks like I could probably get the LEDs to do more things, but I haven't played with that because I've got LEDs around the back to indicate the status of the LAN ports, so they could be blinking, I guess, to show traffic and things in different colours for different speeds. I guess is potential, but at the moment the LAN red, yes, yeah. I don't know. There's nothing happening on those LEDs around the back. Back up and flash and reboot. Yeah. And then network. This is what you saw before in the presentation. The interfaces, devices, global network options. No. The wireless just shows that my wireless exists, yes, and the switch shows we've got 2 virtual LANs, and the first one is for ports 1 to 3, and the second one is for port 4. Okay. Yeah, that's it. We'll log out. So I guess that's as far as I've got so far with this, and the next thing is to wait for a meeting, and I'll take it along and see if I can get it to work at as a router / Wi-Fi for when we have meetings in a normal room. If there's anything anyone wants me to type or show on this Lucy, then please let me know. Okay. And what's that? Peter just sent me a message, I think, saying he's uploaded my presentation. Thanks a lot for that to the WLOG. Okay. So, oh yeah, he's just posted it there. Where my presentation is. What else was I going to say? So yeah, if any questions, I guess, is what it's down to, or anything you want to see that I can switch back to. I can either stay in this this mode of Lucy, or I can switch back to the console.
No, cool. Thanks for that, Ian. That's quite cool.
Yeah, I'm getting there. A bit better than 3 years ago. It's slow.
I mean, I bought my router especially with OpenWRT in mind, but to be honest, in the last 2 years, 3 years, I still haven't gotten around to actually getting to it and actually installing it. Because considering, especially now with working from home, I don't really want to stuff it up and then be offline.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm not intending to use this for my own purposes here at home. It's just purely as an experiment for trying to use it when we have our meetings up at the uni.
Yeah, but no, it looks good. I mean, it seems to have improved quite based on what I've seen all those years ago. So I mean, I managed to fumble around, and that there seems like there's more on the forums and stuff like that. I think it seems like it's like dedicated. I mean, there's an active group working on it and keeping it going. So, I think improvements will keep coming. Yeah, it's nice to see that there's a vibrant community around it, and I mean, it's impressive, sort of like having nearly 10,000 packages out there where you can actually do stuff with. So that's quite cool. And of course, that you had to install Python, that was not a surprise.
I just want to have a play. But like with the Python, there's 650 modules there, so I guess you can actually write Python scripts to twiddle away at the ports and things like that using special modules. But I haven't delved into that sort of thing yet. Yeah. Okay, well, that might be. Unless anyone wants me to do anything. Yeah. Hi, David.
Yeah. Ian, you probably answered the question indirectly, but have you tried hooking it directly up to your ADSL line or your fiber GPON, depending what you have at home?
I've actually switched to using 4G. So I used to have fiber optics in here, and then my kids left home, and I didn't need that much. So I've just got a skinny 4G modem. So there's no way this can connect into the 4G network. I mean it does, but I have to go through my other modem. I can't kind of replace it. So I can't really do that test at my place at the moment.
Understood. And once again, because you're intending it to set up a little guerrilla network inside the university, you probably don't want to have DNS, but have you tried DNS for get your laptop to talk to your desktop, or give the printer a name or something like that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that was another thing. I didn't. Normally you can set up a static IP. There's normally a menu in that in the web GUI of a modem to set up a static IP and have your printer at a static address or something like that. But I didn't sort of see that being possible. So yeah, there's a lot more that I need to experiment with, but I haven't kind of got there yet. Yeah. In fact, yeah, if I go, there is one DHCP under the actually. Oh, it's still sharing, isn't it? Yeah. Can you see that DHCP DNS at the moment? Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's a whole lot of there's one general settings and 1, 2, 5, 5 different categories, menus there, and then there's a whole lot of check boxes and things that you can change there. So
on the last tab, the static leases.
Sorry. Okay. Static leases. Okay.
Yeah,
So this is.
You might be able to add sort of like via Mac ID.
Yeah, actually, that's right. Yeah, would be true. That'd be true. Yeah.
So if you click on add, try that. What dialog comes up?
Host name, MAC address. Yeah. Well, it's already remembered some.
Yeah, everything that's connected. And then you can just sort of like give it an IP address.
Okay. Okay, so I could have got that done. Yeah, I hadn't looked at all those settings there. I don't know what's in advanced. Suppress logging. TFTP. Okay, well, yeah, it's all a bit beyond me. So
you can do pretty much everything. That's why it's a little bit more complicated than other sort of like router interfaces where they really just dumb it down. It's quite cool that you can actually really do stuff with it.
Yeah, probably easier to get out of the web interface and just use DNS mask directly.
Yeah. Although I didn't sort of see how I would do that at the command line interface. How I would set up static leases.
DNS DHCP cdconf, I believe.
What's it under config?
Yeah, DNS mask has its own config files as well.
Or DNS mask, yeah, one of them.
Oh, DHCP I looked at before. That's where I guess I just got to know the command syntax. What's RPCD? That's another.
Remote procedure called daemon.
Oh, okay, I know that.
I can't see your console at the moment. You're sharing your browser.
Right, hang on. I'll just boom. Can you see that now?
Yep.
Yeah, see, and in config, ls, those are my main. But the DHCP was a bit on the boring side, I thought. Not that I'm. Maybe in here, DHCP LAN, with that start and limit, maybe I can set static addresses or something in there. I think. Yeah, DHCP.
Yeah, see, if you scroll back up again to the beginning, you'll see it mentions config DNS mask, and this file doesn't look anything like a DNS mask config file.
No, it must be its own custom stripped down version.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, interesting to look. Thank you. And Alistair's posted a useful reference.
Okay.
Another last question, if I may. Last time I looked at the list of compatible devices, it didn't seem to be very up to date. Do you have an impression that it's both more up to date and includes New Zealand models of various devices?
Look, yeah, I haven't, in the 3 years, I just went back because I still had this modem sort of kicking around in the shed, and I thought I'd drag it out and try again. And so I didn't really, looking at all the hosts that are available. I mean, all the modems. I don't know how much it's been modified.
No problem. Easy enough to do it ourselves. So, yep. Okay. Thank you, Ian.
Good one. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to you, Peter. I don't know whether you turn off the recording.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. Hopefully by tomorrow the recording will be available, and once I finally get around to actually uploading them, I'll also post them, of course, and you'll find out on meetup.com and the Wrt Linux users group mailing list about these things. Cool. In that case, thanks everyone. Have a good night and stay safe, and see you next month.